and welcome to the Dad Dialogue podcast, the show where we talk about the successes and the stresses of becoming a dad and being a dad. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Laurence and I am your host. Today is a super special episode as we look back on the year that we've just had in 2024 and look forward to our new year in 2025. This episode is going to be broken up into four main categories. Category 1, looking back on 2024 from my own personal perspective, looking through the lens of my parenting journey and my family journey and etc. etc. And then we're going to be looking back on 2024 from a podcast perspective, what Dad Dialogue has been. It started this year, what it's kind of grown to, what it's developed into, and includes some clips of previous episodes and previous guests that I've had on the show. Category number 3 is going to be looking forward to 2025 from a personal perspective, what I kind of have planned for, what it might look like for me. That'll be a little bit brief, but then we'll hopefully look forward as well to category number 4, which is looking forward to in 2025 towards what Dad Dialogue has in store for you, the listener, and that is where you will come in, where I'll really need to hear your feedback at the end of the episode. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so glad that you're here, that you've been alongside this journey with me, going through the different trials and tribulations of parenting, as well as just getting involved and getting invested into the various spaces of podcasting and doing life together all across the world with all the different dads that we've been able to interview so far. Future Laurence here. Just need to quickly interrupt myself to add a couple of things. First of all, if you are interested to listen to the full episodes when the clips are shared, all the links will be in the description in a chronological order. And secondly, I keep saying this year, I mean 2024. I filmed this before the new year. So if you hear me say this year, it means 2024 and not 2025. Let's get into it. So let's start off with the reflection on looking back on 2024 from my own personal perspective and my parenting journey, let's say. So, as you may or may not know, I became a stay-at-home dad back in 2023, about halfway through the year, around August time. So 2024, I've really felt as though that's been a really good time for me to find my feet as a stay-at-home dad and what that has looked like, the things I have been able to do, the things I enjoy doing, the things that I relish in the role, and the things and different aspects of the role that I maybe don't enjoy quite so much, and things that I try to change or adjust or where I need more. So if you want to become a stay-at-home dad or even a stay-at-home mum, a stay-at-home parenting is a super important job. Such an important role, but it looks different for every single person, just as though so many different job roles can look different. So I went into it kind of expecting some things and maybe not expecting other things. So I now feel more confident that I've crafted my stay-at-home dad role to be what I want it to be and what's best for me and my family. So what that looks like, I quickly learned that I don't want to be like a house husband. I very much enjoy cooking. I enjoy providing nutritious meals for my family. I enjoy kind of the bargaining aspect of like shopping around, trying to minimize our costs, trying to be frugal in one sense. We live in the Netherlands where it's very expensive. If anyone does live here, you know that it's quite difficult to save money when it comes to grocery shopping. So it's a little bit of an art, let's say. You have to put a lot of time and effort into. But I do enjoy that aspect, but I don't quite so much enjoy having a marvelously, wonderfully tidy and beautifully arranged and organized home, because I have 2 young kids that want to play all the time and get their toys out and do this, that and the other. And I don't want to spend all my time cleaning and tidying and organizing and arranging to make this like beautiful home, which some people might want to do during their time away from their children or even with a child. They might want to put the time into baking cookies or cakes or muffins. And I tried to do all this stuff. Like that's how I tried to fill some of our days. And I just was not feeling fulfilled. So it was that realization to kind of realize, well, this is maybe what it looks like in some films and some movies, or maybe this is what my own parent did, or I know other stay-at-home parents who might do this, but I want to craft it in this way and do something a little bit different. So what I've learned and what I found, at least from this year, is that I am able to have extra time, obviously, with my kids, but I just have more time and more flexibility. So what that's looked like is I've been able to step into a particular serving role within my church community where I've been working alongside some other guys, and we've been planning different activities, different events, different community building aspects for men within our church setting. And I've been able to do that, hosting meetings at my house when the oldest is at preschool and the youngest is at home with us. And that means that we can do things and I can still feel productive. My time has been put into something else, something outside of the house. And that has been the thing that has brought me a lot of pleasure, is finding that thing to do, the serving, the working type aspect of feeling fulfilled from something that's not just internal within our family. Obviously, as I said, I love to provide for my family. You know, I'm not providing financially, but I'm providing emotionally. I'm providing, you know, a safe environment, a healthy environment for them to learn and to growing. All those things are super, super important. But some of the things that are maybe less important that kind of fall down in that, you know, baking cookies every day or having a perfectly tidy household, those are some of the things that I kind of decided to not do, to then look into other things of, I need something to work on. I need something to do. I need to feel fulfilled. And obviously that's where part of the podcast comes from. During that journey, I spoke to so many different dads and parents and environments that would lead parents into having these conversations, but maybe not able to get that super deep into these conversations because obviously you're watching your kids and you're trying to have these interactions. I distinctly remember at a dad's meetup group once, there was another chap there who had one daughter who was kind of in the middle of my two kids in terms of age. And he was asking me all these questions about having a second child, because clearly his wife was really wanting to kind of take that step forward and start trying for the second. And he clearly had a lot of concerns and worries. And it was such a genuine, he was just interested in my experiences as a parent of two kids. He wasn't asking me to necessarily share about research topics or books I've read. He just wanted to know physical, what's happened in your life? How have you adjusted to this? How have you dealt with trying to get them both to nap at the same time? How do you deal with them fighting each other? How do you deal with jealousy if the older one sees you bring a baby home? And these are really genuine questions that people have all the time. You can go to a book and you can read the stats, read the statistics, look at facts and figures, and that can help in some aspects. That can help answer some questions, but the holistic approach to parenting, I think, is so important that you're not going to answer every question. So I started the podcast this year, and that really ticked that box in terms of feeling fulfilled. So I was doing the podcast, and now also, as I previously mentioned, the serving within my church setting, and bringing these things together have been super important for me. And that allows me to be the best parent I can be when I am parenting my kids. And I definitely know that I'm a better dad because I'm doing these other things like working on the podcast, interviewing other dads, spending time in fellowship with other men and talking about what we're planning to do to help other people as well. And that was super important that I realized that and wanted to do that, because if I'd kept going down the route of everything I do has to benefit this household, this family in some way, I would have crashed and burned, I think, about 6 months into the year, because it wasn't fulfilling enough. Like, you get fulfilled from obviously looking after your children. I genuinely do feel fulfilled, but it's different. It's a different thing day by day. And for me, I needed that to change. And other parents might not. Other parents might be completely fulfilled just by looking after their kids. And that's amazing. And I think that's such an incredible aspect of it. But everyone's journey is different, whether they're a work out of the house parent, a work at home parent, stay at home parent, part-time working parent, whatever it might be. I think everyone's choice is so valuable and so interesting to hear. And that's, partly why the podcast was started. And I just invite everyone who is a dad that wants to share, that can come onto the show and share with us. So yeah, that kind of summarizes the reflection on my personal journey and parenting journey. And a good way of summing it up, I can definitely look back on this year of coming to a point of realizing what steps need to be done for me as an individual, not just the steps I need to take for my kids and my family. Register for a doctor, find a preschool, find classes for the younger one to do, music classes, go to this, go to that, register for this, try and do these extra Dutch classes for us. Whatever it might be, like the thing, get a library card. There's all these things that you feel like as a parent you need to do, a long to-do list. But these are all things for your family's perspective of getting set up in being a well-run, a well-oiled machine, an efficient family machine. But it doesn't often come to the point of like, what do I need? What do I need to do next in terms of feeling fulfilled? So I think that's how I came to this arrangement. That kind of like gives a bit of a summary as to the important part of what happened from this year's perspective. And now it's time for category 2, a reflection on 2024 through the lens of the podcast Dad Dialogue specifically. So yeah, started the podcast in 2024. It started in May of this year, and I have put some building blocks in place for that. I'd done lots of thinking and researching about this sort of stuff beforehand. And then it did launch in May. Interestingly enough, if you have either struggled to find the podcast due to similar named shows, or you know of another podcast that has a similar named show, I actually wanted the name Dad Dialogue super early on in the year. It was almost in January. And I did lots of research at that time about the name. Couldn't really find anything. And then when I came to launch, I found there were 2 other podcasts that had very similar names. Not exactly Dad Dialogue, but some variation of that, different variations. So that was like an interesting thing that kind of developed. Clearly, lots of people having similar ideas at similar times and then just happened to publish at roughly similar times. So that's partly the kind of the behind the scenes of that process and that decision. But I have launched 25 episodes this year, which is a good number. I didn't actually go into it kind of wanting anything. I wanted to at least hit 10 episodes before I kind of run out of steam, let's say. But 25 episodes from this year, 24 of them were interviews. There was 1 episode I did as a dad diary, which is what this is. This is the second dad diary, something I am hoping to do more of, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But honestly, after the first kind of 6 or 7 episodes, I was starting to run out of steam, and it was challenging. It was when that episode of Dad Diary was published, because I wanted to hit publishing every week. So I filmed that episode. I still maintain it was a very valuable story, and I hope that did kind of help some people, the Dad Diary one of sharing ambulance trips and hospital stays. But I was at one point struggling to find new guests. I kind of had gone through all my nearby friends and people who I'd asked who wanted to come on, and it just kind of ran out of steam. I was struggling to find other people. People weren't signing up through the website. People weren't getting in touch with me. So it just kind of started to die out a little bit. So there was some times when, there was a few weeks between episodes simply because I didn't have another guest to get on. But then through a few different avenues, people happened to find the website. I got in touch with people through forums like Reddit. I was able to get more people on. And I was so pleased that I did, and got all these people scheduled in and did kind of chats beforehand. And then we just dived into it. We dove into it, let's say. Going through into their journeys, their stories of being a dad, and their successes and their stresses. And it was just such an interesting world. We can look back on this year, all these honest conversations that we've had, answering questions that I think and, hope that many fathers might have had at some point in their lives. So I was talking to my wife recently. We were reflecting on the year as well from our, obviously, marriage point of view and our family point of view. And I realized something, that as a man, I didn't really have much fear, growing up, especially being a tall white man. I didn't have much fear at different times in my life, really, until I got married and had kids. And now, there are some fears and anxieties that come into the world, and questions that you have of yourself and questions that you have of the world, and wonderings of what might happen and what can happen and what will change, and health concerns and this, that and the other. And I think that's quite common between dads, at least. And this seems to get amped up so much more when they do have kids, whether it be fear about their own health, obviously fear about, just the protection and safety of their family unit. So I do think that some of these conversations that I've had with other dads can really help alleviate some of those fears and answer some of those questions that do come up. Questions that you might be niggling around in your brain, but you've never really either had the confidence to ask, or even the vocabulary and the language to specifically ask someone, or you haven't had the person to ask. We've heard from so many different guests about being a grandfather.
I think the temptation is to build the faux village of Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube as your source. Like, what does the website say, or what does Google say? And it's like, okay, that's good, but just as big is the combined wisdom of the village around you.
Yeah.
And how can you do this together? Because you need each other. Don't try and do it all by yourself. So it's fun. Like today, our daughter's doing an interview, and so it's like you can see my wife in the background and maybe hear little noises, or we are with our grandson and being part of that village for her. And the only boundary we set is you got to feed us lunch.
That's a good boundary to have.
So, but yeah, I think the temptation now is really about isolation.
Yeah.
And isolate with your phone or your computer, and it's like, no, get out get out and be with people and rub shoulders with people and have conversations that aren't a sentence long, but have conversations that are deep and meaningful, and learn from each other and watch other parents and how they do stuff and pick out the best and read the stuff that you don't like. But yeah, that village piece is just as important, and probably requires more intention than we had to, because it's much easier to Google.
Yeah. We've heard from dads who have adopted children.
We looked at the process, and we actually started looking at surrogacy. But in the United States, it's super expensive. I'm not sure how it is in the rest of the world, but here at the time, we found out the average cost of surrogacy was about $125,000. Wow. And I was like, that was more than the cost of the house I was living in at the time. So I was like, oof.
Yeah.
So we decided the next thought we had was to try for infant adoption. And, my family has my extended family, there are lots of adoptees. So like my brother's adopted, and I have several cousins that are adopted. So it was always something we were comfortable with and knew, I was familiar with. But we looked into newborn adoption, and it's still pretty expensive. It's like anywhere from $15,000 to $50,000 to adopt in the United States. Or you could go through the foster care system.
We've heard from men that have become stepfathers.
Do you remember the first time she called you dad?
I do, actually. We were, it was just me and her. Her mom was, I don't know, getting her hair done or something like that. I honestly can't remember where she was, but we were watching the movie Mulan. I don't know if you've seen Mulan. But I introduced her to that, and then we spent the next, several years watching Mulan over and over. But,
nice.
We were just hanging out, me and her. We went and got some McDonald's and just kind of made a little movie date out of it. And she said, I'm having a lot of fun, Dad. Oh. And that just, I had to step out of the room. I just had to take a moment.
Yeah. And like I said, what's he doing?
Yeah.
And she's just like, what's going on?
And honestly, it was fairly early. If I want to, I think it was between the ages of 3 and 4. She said that. So she saw me as a father figure or dad fairly quickly. She latched onto me because I think her mom kind of showed that I wasn't going anywhere.
We've heard from people that have been through big international moves, just like myself, but there are other dads that have been through big international moves with children.
So back in 2011, Christy and I, we didn't have the girls yet. We moved from America to France. We lived in France until 2014. And then we spent a year. Lydia was born in 2014. And so we spent a year in Morocco. It was awesome. By the time we left Morocco, Lydia was understanding Arabic quite a bit. And so she was staying with a nanny. And so she was, a lot of the words that we use are Arabic words. And so different things like that we use with the girls. And then from there, we spent some time in Belgium, just a brief time in Belgium before we went back to France. Back in just before COVID, both girls were born, and neither one of them were speaking English as their preferred first language. And so we went back to the U.S. for a year. So we spent a year in the U.S. That was the year COVID, in 2020. That was when we were there. And so we came back to France, and we came here to the Netherlands 1 year ago. And so they've always been exposed to languages, and it's amazing with kids. They just kind of pick stuff up.
I guess when you become a parent, you no longer think about yourself. You no longer love for yourself. That is the decision that you make on a daily basis isn't about yourself anymore, but it's purely for your kids. Yeah, so firstly, this move was for Taylor, firstly. And I guess for Kathy and for Aaron's sake as well. But mostly for the kids' sake. That's why we made this move. And when I say the kids' sake, I'm talking about in terms of opportunities, I guess, in terms of just professional opportunities that they would have, 10, 15 years down the line. And yeah, I guess that's the short answer. We made this move thinking about their futures, the current situation in South Africa, I guess, is like very unpredictable, to put it lightly.
We've heard from Dad who had to support his family through a serious sickness within the family.
There's not much we can do. We didn't know what to do at this point. We're like, she can't live like this. And he's like, I understand. He said, but we'll give this a shot, and if it works, then we can do a bypass. And the bypass would be a very extensive bypass where they had to take certain arteries and veins from her leg and like move them to her other one and like reroute the way the blood flows. So this is what we were hoping would actually end up working, but we were told it had almost no shot of working. Well, when she goes in for surgery, it ends up taking 10 hours. They actually did making it work. And it was a blessing that it made it work, but it also ended up like forcing her into this massive recovery. So she's basically spends the next 6 months in and out of the hospital. She had numerous infections throughout the course of the period, because of all the trauma that she went through, all the wound care that she has to go through and all this type of stuff. So like I said, I think we're in the hospital 5 different occasions. Probably spent about 2 total months in the hospital over the next 6 months. She recovered and she's much better now. She still is not 100%. We don't know if she'll ever be 100%. That's a very difficult thing for her, to have to wrestle with and to struggle with as a mentally and physically. But she's like I said, she's alive and she's able to walk. She didn't lose her leg. These are all things that we were afraid that might end up happening. But it was a long, arduous recovery, and it was very difficult, just on the emotional toil of going through that on her was very difficult. And for me, I was trying to balance being with her, taking care of the kids, being at work, because like I said, this was all taking place during the school year. So there was a lot of stuff that was trying to juggle it, trying to make everything work was always difficult. It was never easy. But it was always, this is what's going to happen. And I was very thankful that our kids were old enough that they could kind of take care of themselves.
We've heard from people that have had their lives seriously affected by health concerns that have then led to different decision points and different processes that they've gone through in terms of having a family.
I was diagnosed with papillary thyroid cancer. The treatment plan was essentially a thyroidectomy. So they removed the thyroid completely. And then after that, I did a round of radiation treatment. So it's not quite as harsh as chemotherapy. So I didn't lose any hair or anything like that. But I was forced to quarantine for 2 weeks in my parents' basement. So when I went to the hospital to get the radiation pill as part of the therapy, they brought it out in a 20-pound lead container. It was about the size of maybe a 20-ounce bottle of Coke, but it was 20 pounds and it was lead, and there was a little pill encased in it. And they gave me a slip if in case I got pulled over by the police. I would hold up this piece of paper on the window that said, I'm currently radioactive, so I can't speak to you or open the window. Since then, I've been in remission, but just been dealing with some of the long-lasting, side effects of not having a thyroid gland, which controls everything in your body. It's really crazy. And in terms of my outlook, I mean, I think it might be kind of cliche, but you have this brush with your own mortality, right? You hear that word, you have cancer, that phrase. It doesn't matter what type or where it is or what stage. It's just, it really rocks your foundation, rocks your core. And you have to reevaluate things. And I think that was a big turning point in our relationship. Not to say that we weren't happy before that and we weren't, happy with each other, but I think it really minimizes some of the other stuff, the extra stuff, the things that we may have fought about before just becomes like, oh, that's not even a big deal. So it gives you a lot of perspective. on what really matters in life.
We've heard from a few dads that have balanced having a child as well as running their own business and running their own company and having employees.
Before, I would be very much focused on like how I can handle like the day-to-day. And I think like Nora really brought about like a mindset change where I'm really looking to like how I can grow the company and scale and get away from like the day-to-day, so that like I hire people that can, you know, like take things off my plate pretty much. I try to get to work earlier, and then I also try to leave work earlier to spend as much time as possible at home. And then like a lot of times, like I used to have to like go see a lot of like social or gatherings or like work meetings that could like take up quite a bit of my nighttime. And I think like now I just like really pick and choose, or like have them like during the work day rather than like having it like after office hours. Yeah, so like there's quite a bit of like mental change, which I think was like a very good, because like it really reminded me that, you know, like it's not about like me doing everything. It really is about like delegating and freeing me up so that I can do things that are more important for myself or even for the company.
And we've also been lucky enough to have a few musicians on and share about that journey of what it's like to be a dad alongside being a musician.
One of the biggest challenges being a musician and touring artist, like you get to meet loads of people all over the place, and you know, pose for photographs, do autographs, all that fun stuff. And it isn't like a reality that is like every day, you know. So you can go away on tour for a couple of weeks and experience that, and it's really cool, and you know, it's great for your ego. But you get home and you have none of that. You know, and I think being able to measure your expectations and your family's expectations and being patient and aware of what the needs are in that environment, first of all, keep you humble, which I think is incredibly important for a partnership. But as well as that, it opens you up to, I guess, knowing how best to serve your wife and your kid in that moment. Because when I walk through the front door, they're not going to see Matt or Dad, the rock star. They're just going to be like, okay, I need you to clean this immediately, or I need you to change this or whatever. It's a humbling moment, but that's the most important thing to them in that moment. And if I want the partnership to succeed, I need to kind of get over myself and be like, yeah, you know what? My trip is done. I'm here now. So my role is like what I can do to work you. And that, if I'm honest, that's hard. It is hard. But the more you do that, the easier it becomes and the more enjoyable it becomes.
I know what I need to do financially to survive, I guess. In the music world, it's really success is survival. And I know that sounds like really, it's not worries me. It's more just that is the reality, unless you are a mega pop star. Those doing the grind. So you have to have lots of different revenue streams, and it's about having those set up and feeding those pots essentially. So whether that be through kind of Patreon model, whether it's through live gigs, merch. So I could be spending an evening, 2 evenings, 3 evenings designing t-shirts, you know, and there's no revenue, but I know when I play live, when I, you know, you're sitting here booking tour dates, when you play live, that's when you get some of that revenue back. So it's just kind of, you go through seasons, I think. So festival season in the summer, you know, that's really important. Having a really good, clear release schedule. And then you just need to get stuff done for that. And then the stuff kind of the money trickles in eventually, but it's a long process. And for me as a songwriter, it's about having works that over time you've got a catalog, and that catalog starts to generate income over the time, but it's not a big earner. It's, for me, it's about a calling thing rather than a money thing.
We've had dads come on the show that just share their absolute delight in their child.
Before having a kid, I used to think like people were being a little over dramatic when they said like, "Oh, becoming a parent changed me." But honestly, like, even the way I view my parents has changed. Like, because I know how I feel when I look at my daughter, and I'm like, oh, they look at me that way. Like, yeah, every little thing that I do that they're proud of, like they really mean that, because I'm proud of my daughter just doing really simple stuff. So, so yeah, my perspective on life has changed. My motivation at work has been increased. The way I look at my wife after giving birth has changed. I mean, I already loved and respected her, but I didn't know there was another level. But we reached another level after watching her give birth, for sure.
And this simply scratches the surface of the different dads that we have had on the show. If I haven't mentioned you or shared a clip from your episode, if you are a guest listening, your contribution towards the show is still super valuable. I'm so thankful for all the episodes that I've done so far. As of filming this right now, I think I've filmed about 29 or 30 interviews. 24 of them have been published so far. And I can genuinely say that there is no one interview or episode that has any more value or weight to another one. They are all unique. They all are nuanced and just offer so much, I think, and can help meet people where they need to be. So if you are listening now and you are a guest that has been on the show, I just want to extend a huge thank you once more for taking your time, whenever it was, to come onto the show and open up and share with us. And I really do value it. I hope that other people have valued your contribution as well. And I'm sure that they do. The people that listen to this show, they listen for a reason. And I don't think it's me. It most likely is the interesting guests that we get on to share their stories. If you are a guest, I'm so thankful for you coming on the show. But that's not to say that there's still so many different types of dads out there. As of right now, haven't had anyone with multiples. So when it comes to twins and triplets, so I would love to have someone on who has gone through that experience, as well as maybe it's a little bit of a heavier topic, but someone who's maybe gone through divorce, separation from a partner, who's had to go through some sort of battle, in regards to custody, or what that has looked like in terms of balancing that, post-separation. So if that is someone like you, or someone that's like that, I would love to have you on. I think there's a lot of light to be shone on those sorts of stories as well. I myself come from a divorced parents. So yeah, I think some of those stories are really super important to be shared as well. It's not every single family, not every single dad is in this picture perfect imagination world of everything's roses and love, and we've had some serious stories on before, and I think things like becoming a stepfather and the adoption stories that I alluded to and clips that we've shared today kind of addresses that, and I think the main positive from this show 100% is true. Every single guest I've had on clearly cares for their kids. And I don't think that any of the guests could ever be levied at that they don't care for their kids and their kids aren't super, super important to them. And they would try and do whatever it takes for the best life for their children. And I think that is maybe not something that has been true to say of lots of dads in the past, but I definitely see that as being true. I think anyone that would give up their time to listen to a podcast like this or be a guest on a podcast like this is coming from a place of love towards their kids and then helping other dads be better parents to their kids as well. So there we have it. There's a reflection 2024 from my perspective as well as the podcast perspective. Let's jump into category 3, looking forward to 2025 and maybe beyond from my perspective. Now, this bit will be super, super quick, I think, because I am a stay-at-home dad. I probably won't be a stay-at-home dad forever. Definitely once both the kids are at full-time school, I will go to be doing something with my time, whether that be teaching again or working within a different sector, working on, something like this, producing content or other resources. There are lots of ideas I do have rumbling around. If you have interest of learning more about what some of my ideas are, I would love to talk to you a bit more personally about helping other people out from a perspective. But we'll get into some other ideas kind of from the Dad Dialogue brand in a moment. But, Netherlands is great. I do like living here. As I've shared before, I love the cycling culture. I love the fact the cargo bike that we have. I really enjoy not having to have a car. So, we're here for now. We don't know how long. We're close enough to family, but there is still that yearning. There is still that possible pull to go back to England at some point. But, we don't know right now. We're happy here for now. I think for 2025, Netherlands will be our home. And most likely still being a stay-at-home parent. The youngest boy will be starting preschool later on in the summer of 2025. So then that would kind of be the time when I can start working out what my life looks like. I'll only be doing a few mornings. So yeah, a lots to think about, a lots to process. And again, if you want to chat to me about this sort of stuff a bit more personally, then feel free to reach out through the website or just daddialogpodcast@gmail.com. And I'll be mentioning that again soon. We're going into that in a moment. But yeah, that was super quick look forward. I don't think there's much I need to tell you about from my personal perspective in terms of looking forward to the new year. But category number 4, the thing that I'm most excited about sharing with you, the thing that I think you should be the most excited about, is looking forward to 2025 through the lens of the Dad Dialogue podcast and the Dad Dialogue brand, ? Yes, so my hope is Dad Dialogue can expand into more of a brand. I think chatting to dads is amazing. I love it. I love interviewing other dads, sharing their stories. But the thing I've realized is that Dad Dialogue, dads should be in dialogue with other dads, with their partners, with their children, with strangers, with so many other people. So much research says that kids learn social interactions from their parents first and foremost. I know from my perspective, if I am refusing to talk to strangers or refusing to engage with people, refusing to try and make friends with people and just kind of like be in my own little bubble, that's probably what they're going to do as well. And if we try and like push them out, go and say hi to that child, go and introduce yourself, go and try and play with them. But if we're at the playground and we see another parent there and we don't do the same to that parent, then, what is it going to look like? So that's kind of the heart behind what Dad Dialogue can kind of expand into in terms of the brand. I would hope to provide some resources for this sort of stuff, conversation starters. There's a lot of research on this sort of stuff, and I'm hoping to digest some of it and put it into a more consumable form, let's say, through my website and also on Instagram. So that is some plans that I'll be going into. Do follow me at Dad Dialogue. We're hoping to get a few more things on there. And everything that I deliver to you, this is super important to me as a content creator, as someone who's, talking into a microphone, someone who thinks their voice can offer value to someone. It's so, so important that people understand that my voice and the content that I create is always going to be delivered through one of 3 means. And what that means is the 3 means of delivery, or the 3 means of, sourcing the content, let's say. I think it's so important that this is super, super clear. It's always going to come from one of 3 places. One of them is my experience. And I hope to always make it clear that if I am sharing something, a story of mine, an anecdote of mine, something I've done that's worked, I want to make it super clear that it is me in my context, with my kids, with my family, with my work-life balance, whatever it is, like in our environment, with my wife and our preschool, whatever it is. My context, my anecdote, my story. The second source will be the anecdotes and the perspective of the guests and the people we have on the show. Their context, their reasoning, their understanding, their processing, etc., etc., etc. It could be from one guest or multiple guests. And the third one is published literature research. And I think this is so important. I think any topic that we can kind of look at relating to parenting or relating to being a dad or being a partner or communicating, just trying to improve ourselves in some way, some form of, lack of a better phrase, self-help, can be coming from these 3 sources. And anytime that I try to deliver something to you that might be construed as advice, I want to be super clear as to where it's come from, why I'm giving it to you, and what you can kind of do with it. So the hope is on the Instagram that I can kind of take some clips from other episodes. Let's just say, for example, we're talking about screen time. I might get some research about screen time, get a few facts and figures about how children are interacting with screen time, what some of the experts say. Super important, super relevant. I might share a little bit of my story, some of the struggles I've had with it, or some of the challenges I've had with it, or maybe what I've done that has worked. And then I might share a clip from one of the guests about something they've done that's successful, or their opinion on it. And I think through being a grown-up adult, taking in these different sources of information, can kind of process that together. And if it comes to a point of wanting to affect your life and your parenting, then you can do that with all of the resources available to you right in front of you And there's no kind of disillusion about, oh, Laurence said I should do this, so I'm going to do it. And then it might not work. And then you get upset with me because it didn't work. It's more a case of, oh, I know that Laurence shared this fact, and then he said that he did this, and then that other person said they did that. I'm going to do this, this, and this, and see if it works. And I think that's what parenting is. Things aren't always going to be a home run for every single situation and every single context. So that's really important for me to share right now, that anything I do publish is always going to be coming from one of those three lenses. And I want to make it super clear to you which one of that is when we are going through this sort of content. So I hope that is understandable and that makes sense. So having said that, in terms of what Dad Dialogue can kind of reach, if you have any input, again, please do reach out to me, daddialoguepodcast@gmail.com. If you'd like to add in your ideas, your opinions, do reach out to me, let me know. I will be changing the release schedule of the podcast to every 2 weeks. We've taken a break over Christmas, but I'm hoping to release a interview with another dad in the exact same format as before, every 2 weeks in 2025. The reason for this is it takes me quite a long time to edit each episode because I want to make it the best it can be. I don't just want to click a few buttons and let AI take care of a few things and allow them to miss some, glaring production errors, let's say. So I do kind of take pride in how much time I put into producing each episode. So it does take me a bit of time. It can just eat into, family time. So every 2 weeks is going to help me just to ensure that I produce the best product for you. And alongside that, I'm hoping to do an episode of Dad Diary each week where I'll be diving into these topics through these three lenses that I spoke about earlier. It's me again. I misspoke here. I actually meant to say Dad Diary will be once a month, not once a week. I am going to be starting a Patreon if you would like to give back to the podcast and help support it, especially in supporting this endeavor that I look to do further on. Dad Diary, the first episode will be released in January for free. Will come out on normal platforms. Then after that, the consequent Dad Diaries, where I will go a deep dive into a topic, let's say screen time or health or exercise or being a stay-at-home parent or having siblings, whatever the topic is. There will be a Dad Diary episode that will dive deep into a topic, that will share my experience, the experience of other guests, as well as what the research says. And the Dad Diary is going to be a really big time for that research prong, let's say, of the trident. And I'll go really hard into that to ensure that I'm offering something of value to you. So that will be on Patreon. I really hope you can join me over there. It's something that I'm really excited about. It's something that I think is going to be really useful. So do check out the Patreon. That will be live when this episode goes live. There'll be a few other perks along the way, little other things. If you just want to, chuck a dollar or two my way each month, I may be so appreciative of it. So do just take a moment to think about that. I don't make this decision lightly to put some content behind a locked wall, but I hope that you guys can see the value and see the time that I'm hopefully going to put into it. And that first episode will be free, like I said, in January. So I hope that can be something to provide to you that you see what the value is moving forward. If you have any suggestions of Dad Diary topics, like I've just alluded to, health, exercise, whatever it might be, do reach out, daddialoguepodcast@gmail.com. Give me your suggestions of things for me to do a deep dive into, like I said, through that three-pronged trident of attack, let's say, of my experience, guest experience, or experience of other dads that I've met, as well as the research and what the research says. Finally, in terms of the Dad Dialogue podcast, there are so many dads that I want to reach, so many podcasters and content creators, authors, musicians, just people that I engage with, that I know are dads and I would love to have on the show. I'm not going to go through a list now. It's not really worth it. But if there's anyone you want to have on the show, maybe there is an author or a musician or a celebrity, who is a dad and you want to have on the show, just send me a message. I can't make any promises of getting, I don't know, who's a famous dad out there? I don't know. Cristiano Ronaldo has kids. I doubt I'll be able to get Cristiano Ronaldo, for example. But, send me a suggestion. I can try. And that's alongside releasing the episodes every 2 weeks. I'm hoping to try and line up, some people that might have their name out there, so to speak. They might already have a bit of a following. They can help bring more people over to the Dad Dialogue bandwagon, let's say, the Dad Dialogue crew. And then I'll still love to share different people's experiences, of people, just ordinary dads that want to share their experiences, and people that reach out to me through the website or at the email. I'll always make time for people that want to share their stories with me. So if you're listening to this now and you want to share your own parenting journey, do reach out to me. As I said, I must have said this so many times now, but daddialoguepodcast@gmail.com, or just go to daddialogue.co.uk. There's a contact form there. And just on the topic of new guests, I would love to dive into people from different cultures and different backgrounds as the kind of Western world of North America and Europe, let's say. We have had a guest from each continent before. We have been able to have a dad from South America, North America, Europe, Africa, Asia, and Oceania, Australia, and so on. Haven't had a dad from Antarctica yet. Not sure that's going to happen. But if there are other dads that you know who are from other countries, other cultures, things like, new places, I'd love to hear from them as well. Get their stories on. I think it's super important things that we can learn from as well. So that's another quick call to action if you do know someone that has an interesting background, an interesting history and culture and family kind of development from that perspective. So do reach out if that's something that you either identify with yourself or know someone that does. Okay, so we have reflected on 2024 from my perspective. We've reflected on 2024 through the perspective of the podcast. We've looked forward to 2025 from my perspective, and we have looked forward to 2025 through the podcast's perspective. Now, that's all that's left is for me to ask you a few more things, especially if you've made it all the way to the end of this episode and you're still hearing me talk. Feedback. I'd love to hear from you. Let me know what keeps you around listening. Why are you still listening to this episode right now? What have you found valuable about the show and what I bring to you? Or are you just doing the washing up and your hands are all wet and you can't change and skip the podcast? I don't know. Maybe that's why you're listening right now. But if you have something that you'd like to say to me, again, daddialoguepodcast@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Feedback, positives, negatives, constructive criticism, whatever it might be. I'd really love to hear from you. I did mention it earlier, but again, topics for the Dad Diary. Let me know if you have anything you'd like me to talk about, things to focus on. And again, we did mention it again, but I'm just going to say once more, possible future guests. Maybe you know someone that wants to come on the show, you know someone that has an interesting story to share, or you just want me to try and get a specific person on. Reach out to me, daddialoguepodcast@gmail.com. I must have said that about 10 times this episode now. But I really, really, really appreciate you taking the time to listen to this episode. I'm super excited about what 2025 has in store for me and you, Dad Dialogue. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have an awesome day. I hope to talk to you again soon. Goodbye.